Quickly, we continue from there because the minority in parliament is boycotting an orientation program for members of parliament, citing the cost component of the program, saying it is too much and that they would not be a part of it. But what's the reality? Speaker Bagman has said the decision to hold the event at the Volta Serene Hotel in the Volta region is the result of a comprehensive evaluation of several factors. But the minority says there is political bias. But is there?
Well, let's bring in Sammy Obeng now. He's Executive Director of Parliamentary Network Africa. Sir, thank you for joining the conversation. And feel free to reflect on some of the points in the arguments we're having so far. But I want to talk about the opposition protest strategy. I've been thinking about it. Is this a form of protest against government actions, or is this abandonment of duty? In your expert opinion, what does this look like?
Thank you, sweetie, and Ben and all the other panelists on the call. Let me first start from, as you invited me to reflect on some of the points that had earlier been made. Then I come to the substantive question that you had put forward. For the past 12 years, I've been engaged with the Parliament of Ghana, either working with Parliamentary Network Africa or even when, together with my friend, the Honorable Vincent Assefuwa, we were offering service to nation when he was my National Service President, and I was also offering my service in the Parliament of Ghana. We've seen, even before then, the evolution of MP's orientation, how it started, what it had been like in the past, and what it has transformed into. People will recall that, from its early days of small sessions in Parliament to when civil society had some resources to support it, and Parliament was holding it in Gempa for a couple of years, to when MPs protested and said Gempa was not bourgeois enough, to have members of Parliament spend a week there for their MP's orientation, to when it started moving to other facilities. We've seen all of this happen over the years. And yes, it is true that whenever a new Parliament is constituted, we have members of Parliament expected to go through this orientation. So it's a very important activity on the parliamentary calendar. In fact, it is one of the things that we advocate for in all of the parliaments that we work in, as Parliamentary Network Africa. It has become one of the very important activities on every parliament's calendar to take members of Parliament through orientation. And so for us, with this evolution, we've been excited to see that this process has moved away from one that was heavily civil society supported or, development partner supported, to one that Parliament itself now has its skin, in the game, and is taking, its own orientation and capacity development of its members of Parliament very serious. To the extent that now it is being coordinated by the Parliamentary Training Institute, which is, a department within the Parliament of Ghana, set up to look at matters relating to MPs, capacity building of members of staff, and what have you. But in doing this, it is important also that Parliament considers matters relating to cost, especially for an arm of government or an institution of state that has complained about budgetary allocation, about the resources that the budget makes provision to the Parliament of Ghana and how it affects even sometimes committees and their ability to do work. And so for Parliament to be able to make all of these assessments to know where best they need to put their monies. So orientation is important, but it's an institution that has budget deficits or does not have all of the resources it needs to do the work. And so it must be very prudent in managing its resources. And that's where the parliamentary service comes in. And the Honorable Majority Chief Whip mentioned that these things are coordinated by the parliamentary service, the clerk, together with the service, accounts office, the various procurement people go through the processes and what have you. What is happening in recent times really puts the members of staff of the parliamentary service in a very difficult situation, because what we are seeing appears to me like a group of members of parliament or leaders of parliament who are more interested in where some of these activities go based on who manages, owns, runs these activities. And the optics are not good for the Parliament of Ghana. The optics are putting the staffers of Parliament who are doing some very diligent job on these matters under very, very tight situations. And if we do not take care, these things may crash on our head. Why? We've had an instance where, because both sides of the aisle did not agree on where to hold a particular orientation, MPP MPs decided we are going to what is considered the MPP Hotel of Rock City. NDC MPs considered to go to what is considered as the NDC Hotel in Volta Serene and hold separate trainings. When, yes, the argument can be made that, well, it's about per head. So the individuals that go, the number of rooms that you take is what you actually get to pay for.
Yeah.
But the facilitators are not per head. You get two sets of facilitators to facilitate two different workshops, which could have been one. The parliamentary staffers that come in as support staff will have to play here and will also have to play here. Those are extra costs that could have been avoided. And so the optics are not good. And they should stop giving us the impression that there is something to probe into on whose facility gets used and why it gets used, and under what circumstances Parliament will be willing to use somebody's facility at the expense of another. Having said that, now let me go to the substantive bit on boycotts and whether it is an essential to effective or efficient tool for minority protest. There are many tools available to members of Parliament to express themselves and express grievances. Some of them are the kinds of tools that you employ when you are seated in Parliament. You ask questions, you debate, you make statements, you filibuster, and all of that. There are those also that you employ to show your absence. In all of it, I always say that parliamentary business is as much about the rules and orders of Parliament as it is about also your strategy. And if as a caucus you choose a particular strategy, you must be willing and able to assess the implications of that strategy, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. If members of Parliament in the minority caucus decides that they are not participating in an orientation workshop, where all members of Parliament are supposed to participate and very essential things will be taught at that orientation workshop, then you ask yourself, would it be in the interest of leadership who probably have been to some of these orientations 3, 4, 5 times? Or what will be the implications on newer members of Parliament who need this? Look, we've had workshops and training sessions and sessions with members of Parliament at different levels, first-timers, second-timers, third-timers at Parliamentary Network Africa. And at every point in time, you know that there is something new that needs to be learned. So I'm looking at what will be the implications on members of Parliament within the caucus who refuse to attend this. Would it be that later on there will be another orientation for the minority members, or would Parliament decide that it is done and that is it? And so they should go and bear their own crosses on how they get to cope within the presence of Parliament.
Sammy Obeng,
These must be taken with some of these future intentions in mind. But Parliament must also be careful in not creating the impression that these procurement decisions are made on the back of who knows who, rather than proper procurement processes.
That question you just posed, I posed it to Roxanne Nelson Dapiamepo, and he also brought in the Rock City Volta Serene issue. Because of where you work, maybe you can influence some of those thoughts. But very quick question. We'll also bring in Dr. John Osankwa-Pong shortly. On the back of historical antecedents, Dapiamepo, for example, says, this is his 9th year in Parliament. He's been to Volta Serene 7 times, spanning different administrations. Is there a case for Volta Serene Hotel? And if not, what are the options? Or are there better options? Is there an alternative that maybe we could look at? Where do you stand on that, on the back of the historical antecedents?
Ben, on the back of historical antecedents, for the 12 or so years that I have been involved with Parliament of Ghana, I can name about 5 hotels in this country which are considered our Parliament's place of engagement. Many times I have had reason to participate in parliamentary engagement and activities at Rock City, at Volta Serene, at Capital View in Koforidua, at AH Hotel in Accra, at Alisa in Accra. You would receive an invitation from Parliament, and these are some of the very obvious choices that you would find. some would say that for every institution, you have your list of suppliers. The procurement department has a list of suppliers, which indicates a group of institutions that you work with repeatedly.
So if it goes to any of these within the number you've mentioned, there's no surprise.
Well, I would not be surprised at all. And of course, the same way that I will not be surprised if Parliament creatively tries to do some of these things using some of its nicer facilities that it has in Parliament, which helps to save costs. And so there is that cost-benefit analysis, which I believe that for an institution that always complains about budget constraints, these must occupy the minds of, parliamentary service staff, procurement officers, decision makers in Parliament.
All right.